It is spring, and when spring comes, Brenda Frese brings in a fascinating crop of new players to Maryland. Very excited to talk about how they all come together. Of course, with the coming of that season comes summer tours and a different way of living as a coach right now. Locked On Women's Basketball is going to get into all of it starting now.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
A very happy good morning to you. I am Howard Megdal, welcoming you to Locked On Women's Basketball. And of course, thank you for making us your first listen every day. So many more of you keep subscribing on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Over 200,000 of you listened in April alone, showing up for us the way we show up for you 6 days a week. Make sure you subscribe and also make sure you support not just me, everyone who's doing the incredible work over at The Next, where we have over 100 reported pieces on women's basketball every month. TheNextHoops.com. It's $9 a month, $72 a year. All your support goes to the writers, editors, photographers doing this work. And Brenda Frese, head coach at Maryland, is keeping us busy, as always, signing a fascinating bumper crop of transfers. I love the way this team looks on paper to come together. And I'm curious, Brenda, to start at that moment. What made this particular group of players the ones you wanted to bring in? So how do they interact in your grand plan?
Well, I think as a staff, we were really intentional. That we kind of knew what weaknesses we had, kind of what we needed within our roster, the depth that we needed to be able to provide. Obviously, we needed size. That was a big area, as well as getting an additional point guard. But I thought our staff just did a tremendous job, just really honing in. We really had a purpose of what we were looking for. And then you have to have some luck. I thought this year, compared to a year ago, we tried to get forwards and post players, and there just weren't that many available, where all of a sudden this offseason there were. And, in conferences that we were able to have some connections with players and players that wanted to stay here on the East Coast. So you have to have some luck in it as well, as we all know, but just can't say enough for our staff and just the amount of hours. It was by far, I've been in this a long time, and you usually have different things that take place, but one of the hardest off seasons when you talk about in April, just with the timing of the portal and just the amount of hours you have to put in such a short amount of time.
And so doing that, you suffer through the consequences of always making the NCAA tournament year after year. So you don't have an offseason that begins in that way. Now it's just this duel. I've talked to so many coaches, on the show and also off the air, about how it kind of changes your entire calendar. How do you kind of navigate that day to day? And when you set out to figure out, you have your staff working on these two things at once, how do you delineate?
Well, fortunately for us, we have a big, really big staff. So we're able to put our focus in both directions. I have great empathy for staffs that don't. Especially, I think it's really hard when you talk about juggling the portal during the NCAA tournament. I know a year ago for us, when we went through and we had a team that we thought, we went to Elite Eight, Final Four opportunity. Your focus is really on the tournament and not the portal as much. And we learned from that we had to have, all eyes on both. So it as a head coach spreads you really thin, because you want to put your focus on scouting, but you also need to be making phone calls to these kids that enter the portal. So this year, not going as far, we were able to have more time to spend in the portal. So it's really conflicting where to put your time, and you're spread really thin. I think that's where I talk about it being so hard. I remember my son in April, middle of April, says to me, are you working, is it harder now than during the season? And he could observe it when you're walking through the door at 10:30 at night and taking all these visits and watching film and making phone calls. So it's a really hard balance coming out of your season to putting in those 14 to 16 hour days.
I know family's always been so important to you. how much more intentionality do you have to put into finding that time? And does that off season even exist at this point when you are a coach of a high level Division I program?
Well, you are right. You have to be very intentional, and my family is always going to come first, and finding those pockets and windows of time. I think as a head coach, what I feel, I'm really sad about the fact that we used to have better balance in a really tough profession, and now it's really being taken away. I think as a head coach, you've got to protect your coaches, your staff, your support staff. So I'm very intentional when you talk about in May. We're going to take a lot of time off because we used to have that recharge in April that we never received. They put in 2 shutdown periods. It's still probably not enough. And then I think as a head coach, you have to protect your windows of, in August. And, they've now put evaluation periods in April, May, June, July. So you've got to find those windows for your staff. And I think I do a really good job of that. Of like, holidays, we're going to make sure we take every holiday. We're not going to schedule visits on those weekends because I have to protect our staff and that ability to recharge, or I'm not going to have them very long. And we're not going to last very long in this profession if we don't get those resets. And coming out of the shutdown, we all came back, and you can just see, everyone's happier. They're, they're happy anyways, but I'm saying you just are different when you get those recharges and those resets as a group.
It's so important. Burnout is a thing, and I'm glad to hear. I'm not surprised to hear there's an intentionality because, again, and if you'll forgive kind of the point of personal privilege on this, I feel like what you are building at Maryland, what you have built at Maryland, has been ahead of the curve. I don't know if you've heard, but there's been a couple of schools moving around from conference to conference over the last few years, and so obviously Maryland making that decision. I remember at the time there was a fair amount of discussion about it, a fair amount of controversy about it. But seeing the way in which the direction of, let's say, major college athletics is going generally, and specifically here in women's basketball, seeing the One Maryland collective becoming more active and seeing that playing a part in what you guys have been able to do. Can you kind of take me through the way in which you feel like you've been able to integrate that into what is, like you said, this additional work time rather than this additional off time?
Well, it matters. And I can't say enough about our administration and just the support we've received. I mean, really, if you, don't stay proactive, you're going to be left behind to be irrelevant. And, I thought a year ago, like I said, when we went to an Elite Eight, and we didn't have a collective, and we weren't able to offer NIL at that time, besides the one-offs. And just the ability for our administration to recognize how important it was to, our athletic department, our basketball programs, football, and all our sports. They really put their focus on that, and supported us. And you see that out of this offseason with the portal. I can't say enough that it continues to show the support that I have here, and all our coaches do here at Maryland, just with that vision.
I guess, and before we get into our first break, and I want to get into the particulars of the players you brought in, because you brought in some personal favorites to watch, and I'm so eager to see how you guys develop. But this is a bigger picture question for you, which is to say that you have never shied away, like what you just referred to about the need to have NIL more involved. You are public and you talk about what your programs have needed. And you've done this at every stop, and you've done this since you were a young coach. Where does that confidence come from? Where does that desire to make it clear, look, this is what we need to be successful come from for you?
I probably, just how I was raised, my parents, and, I got to live out a work ethic, from my parents and watching it. But then, all 6 of us as kids, I mean, they just supported us and gave us a lot of confidence. And I think when you have that layer behind you, you're able to do some great things. I mean, it helped me coming up through sports, and I think you kind of develop that mentality when you're involved in sports. And then it's been able to transfer here in the coaching world. But, I read a quote the other day, and it talked about how you have to embrace change or be irrelevant. And I'm a very active, reader, podcaster, all that. And it just resonated with me right now. The era we're in, a lot has changed in my 35 plus years of coaching, but you do have to continue to change with the times, or you are going to be left behind. You're going to be irrelevant and get passed by. And I guess I'm too competitive of a person that I'm going to find all the positives. And I've said to someone recently, I started playing back when I was 10 and have lived out this career. And I understand players give up, proms and, weekends. And, I remember the amount of time I spent in the gym and watching athletes now. So to allow them to be compensated for their name, image, and likeness is a great thing. And, just having the ability to be able to support them with their full-time job.
It's wonderful to see. It is overdue. And no, you are never left behind. So much more with Brenda Frese in segment 2 right after this. But first, Locked On Women's Basketball is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. And something you got to keep in mind is that LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals. Yes, billion, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. Take it from me, as somebody who was hired for multiple companies writing about women's sports. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Been no different for me. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA, LOCKEDONNBA, to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So we are back with Brenda Frese, segment 2, and we're going to have to break it down because we have to talk about some of these individual players. And I want to start with Christina Dolce, who comes. So there's a couple of things here. Number one, she fulfills the requirement, which is that you must always have a New Jersey player on your roster at all times. And so as the University of New Jersey South, that is obviously gratifying to see as a New Jersey native as well. But I just, as a point for our reader or for our listeners to understand, I just our readers as well when we publish to the next, that this is a program that produces high efficiency players around the rim. I just had the opportunity on Tuesday to watch a certain Bree Jones, who became automatic at the rim under your tutelage. I had the chance to see Alyssa Thomas, the queen of triple doubles, who does much the same thing. And from my perspective, Christina may have been the best post defender in the Big East last year. And the one missing ingredient is seeing her become efficient around the rim to get to where she wants to go. So a couple things. Number one, take me through what you see in her as a player. And number two, how do you go about developing that skill in a particular player?
Well, yeah, thank you. And I agree. New Jersey's been really good to us. So we want to continue that. But I'm excited for Christina, and you're 100% right. She's going into a program that she's really going to, continue to excel. They've done a great job at Villanova with her. And now to be able to have that experience, and you talk about she's ahead defensively. I think the way she runs the floor, our transition, she'll get 6 or 8 points alone just with her ability to run the floor. And defensively, to be able to have that shot blocker for our guard play is going to be massive. But I think when you put even more great players around her, and the balance that we're going to have, that we've always had in our scoring, and all 5 players on the floor, I think some things will be easier for her, where, she'll be able to catch and finish, and she's very good from the high post to rip and be able to attack the rim. And then with our player development, again, I put it up against anyone, and it's been proven when you look at players at the next level, we'll break that down. And from the offensive end, we can't wait to get her in here in a couple weeks and start this summer. We're taking a foreign trip, so we're going to be able to get ahead with our practices, and it's perfect timing with all these numbers that are coming in. So we're going to get a lot of player development with her early within our offense.
When we cover WNBA games, it is a rare thing when there aren't multiple Maryland players involved across the landscape. So to that idea, and again, you spoke about the pace. She's going from a program, and Denise Dillon does a great job, but Denise obviously runs a very different sort of offense. 336th in the country in pace. You guys actually ran the fastest you have in the past 15 years when they've been tracking pace. You were 22nd in the country in pace last year. It's not like you were ever a slowdown team, but you've obviously found another gear. Is that something year over year that you are hoping to continue, or is that something where you really are just going to kind of go year by year based on the personnel you got?
I can't stand offense. That's like watching paint dry. So that's never going to change. I think it probably goes back to my 6-on-6 days in Iowa when I played up through 8th grade. I want to average between 80 to 100 possessions a game. And I think players come here because we are going to play both ends of the floor, but you're going to get to score, and everybody's going to get to score. When you can have those kind of possessions, and getting up and down the floor, we love to excel with our athleticism and with our conditioning to be able to separate against teams. Like, you got to be in shape to play against us. And it's just a fun style of play that our players love to be a part of.
There's always a good show being put on at the Xfinity Center. Amari DeBerry is, speaking of size, somebody else you're able to bring in, a true 6'6". And sort of and maybe you don't know the answer to this till you get them both in the gym. Do you see them as kind of pairing Christina and Amari together, and Christina is sort of more of a true 4? Because at times you would see her run as a 5 at Villanova, Christina. I'm just wondering sort of how they fit together in your mind.
Yeah, I do. And, I'm excited for Amari. She's finally healthy. So, she kind of has gone through a lot with the injuries up and down at UConn. But, this is someone we recruited in high school and watched her through all her AAU and high school experiences, had her on campus, as great of a basketball player as she is, she's even a better person. But yeah, the two of them together, and when you have that size inside, and she's so skilled, and clearly what she's learned and gained from UConn and the work that she's done there, very excited to be able to have her come in and make an impact and play a lot of minutes. But can you imagine those two together? You had a Saylor Poffenberger as well in that mix, and it's just a lot of great pieces that we can't wait to get started with.
Also Kayleen Schmeichel, it's interesting to me too that in both those cases, and Saylor as well, you're addressing size, it feels like, at every position. It's not just a question of trying to find bigs who are helping you get where you need to go. Was that a major focus as you sort of looked at the way in which you wanted the roster to come together?
I've always loved size. My dream is to have a roster where everyone's taller than me. All right. So, I'm 5'10", 5'11". So, right. Jokingly, but, I love length and size, but you got to be able to play. And, we also needed to address our 3-point shooting. It was probably the lowest that we had this off season, which made it difficult of everyone kind of collapsing in the paint on us. So, to have those type of players that can, stretch with Saylor shooting the 3 and, Schmeichel, and then you got Sarah Tabiasso who can light it up as a point guard from 3 as well. So, a lot of areas that are going to help us. And, and then with the remaining roster that we already have with Cheyenne Sellers and Bree McDaniel and Allie Kubek. And so, it's exciting to be able to put all those pieces together, which we love to do as a staff.
I will say, and I think it's important for listeners to understand, there's struggling, and then there's like relative Maryland struggling, which is to say that you shot 36.2% from 3, right? Like 22nd in the country. I understand a little lower than it's been some years, right? But even so, there are a lot of programs that would look to get to that point. I just think it's important context. Allie, of course, was better than even money from three last year, which is just
Yeah, it is. And we do joke about that as a staff. Sometimes the perspective, we are spoiled, but you create a standard and a really high bar. And, it's important that, we know where we want to be.
it's interesting to me where and how you get there in the shape of everything from your schedule to long-term planning too. So we'll be back shortly in segment 3. I want to talk about the shape of this, the schedule you played, and sort of where you think the sweet spot is for a program. So back right after this. Locked On Women's Basketball is brought to you by BetterHelp. Now, look, we all have friends and family and our own ability to think things through, to understand ways to improve our lives, our process, our outcome. But sometimes what you need is somebody with that distance to give you a sense of it. Therapy, in other words. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's convenient. It's flexible. It's suited to your schedule. You fill out a brief questionnaire. You get matched up with a licensed therapist. If that match doesn't take, switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. Back here with Brenda Frese, head coach at University of Maryland. And so we talked a little bit about how we got there. And I remember visiting you in early February, and there were bubble questions. Are you going to make the tournament or not? The record wasn't where it usually is. You guys played, I think, like 36 of the top 25. So you had, the strength of schedule was off the charts as it usually is. And I just wonder how hard that is. You can, generally speaking, in previous eras say, all right, this is these are the freshmen we have coming in, and we're going to talk about your freshmen before we go. This is let's say the trajectory of a program, and you can schedule home and homes, and you can look 2-3 years out. Every year is a fresh start. How do you kind of parallel that with schedule building now?
It's really hard, and I can't say enough for my assistant coach, Caitlin Frotz, who oversees it. And you do have to continue to evaluate it from year to year, especially now with the transfer portal and bringing in so many pieces to balance your freshmen, to have some experience to be able to play. And then, now with the Big Ten Conference, the teams we're bringing in and what that's going to look like every single night in conference play. So we took a good look. Last year for us, we had lost 2 first-round draft picks, and the schedule was way too tough given the roster that we had. So it is a delicate balance. When you look at this year, we're potentially adding 10 new players. When you talk about 7 of the transfers, 3 freshmen. So again, we really had to kind of find that balance in our non-conference of those top 25 opponents, as well as, games that we can really allow other players to play, so we can get a feel for our freshmen and what they can contribute early on in the non-conference.
So looking at those freshmen, you talked about, at the point guard position, obviously having Kendall Walker coming in is significant. You have a couple of wings. I don't know if you call Brianna Williams a wing or a big or somewhere in between, but you've never shied away from having your freshmen play right away. Does knowing that you have this crop of 3 players coming in feed directly into your decision to go to Croatia and have that type of ability to be able to coalesce as a team just as much as with the transfers?
Yeah, we were really intentional this year with the freshmen and with the scheduling in mind, because this past season we didn't have as many games that, like you said, because we were truly on the bubble to go to the tournament. So just so many games we needed to win. And then, like you said, with Croatia, that, is invaluable to be able to have those 10 practices and be able to take your team over and get some games under your belt, and couldn't have worked out. I never thought we'd have this many new players coming in, and here we are. So the timing is absolutely perfect to be able to have this summer and the access we're going to be able to have.
As you think about going forward, what you are looking to build, what the Big Ten looks like. I did 78 teams, right, in the Big Ten now. Did I count that correct?
It feels like it.
It's amazing. And, we even saw the home and aways and, suddenly, USC and UCLA and Oregon, these are all programs that are sort of on the agenda with each passing year. Are there any kind of ways you can approach things differently now that you are at the epicenter of what is, to my mind, clearly the number one conference and the truly national conference as well?
Yeah. We're super excited about that. The competition you're going to be able to receive. We were talking about it as a staff. I mean, just these games when you're playing, single games now, home and away, and just what that's going to look like for tiebreakers when you talk about standings within the conference tournament and seeding for the NCAAs. So, and it is, I think we're all still trying to figure it out and evolve. Like you're talking about your non-conference schedule of like finding that balance of wins that you need to have and experience, and then finding enough marquee games that you can win as well that are going to help you, throughout that. So, but I'll say this, I can't wait to see how it all unfolds, especially in our conference. I think you're going to see where I felt like this year we had to be 500 to get in the tournament. I don't know if that'll be the case with the Big Ten and all the amount of games and teams you're going to be playing competitively night in and night out. It's going to be awesome.
I am very much looking forward to it. Delighted to see the Big Ten Network offering that opportunity to continue to grow. More to the point, seeing national TV games come along as well to kind of bring it full circle. It was striking to me the number of people who talked about the rise of Caitlin Clark as if this was something brand new and sellouts brand new. And you can go back and you can look at the Xfinity Center, which has been filled, and you have been filling it for a couple of decades. You've been at the forefront of this movement for a very long time. Is it gratifying to see people catching on? Is there a part of you that's like, what took you so long? Is it a mix of both? I feel like so much of women's sports is a mix of both. I just wonder where's your head at these days as you see this kind of mainstream growth for the sport that we love so much?
It is really gratifying. And I think, for us as older coaches and, growing up in the game and not being in arenas, where anyone cared or having the national exposure to, knowing that this momentum has always been built and it was coming. I don't know that, maybe around COVID and more people were at home and you had all that access and time that people finally started kind of paying attention. And you had some of the, through the NCAA tournament, the awareness was brought out of some of the inequities of, the game. And just seeing the movement that it really has changed. And I think once you watch us, you're seeing people are hooked. They see role models they can emulate. You look at the timing was perfect with Caitlin Clark. When you look at someone very similar to like a Steph Curry and someone who has this ability to knock down these long range shots, and kudos, because now as people are going in and you watch the game last night, the other night with the Fever and Connecticut Sun, and I'm like, finally they're seeing, Alyssa Thomas, almost like the female version of LeBron James and how special she is, and kind of to not have the awareness on her, the respect that is due. So, it is an exciting time in our game, and, super grateful that so many people now are paying attention.
2.1 million people got to see Alyssa Thomas have a triple-double. That is a number that should become the norm. But like you said, without folks like you, people, you can go back much further and go to Molly Bolin 50 years ago, who does what 6-on-6 has become.
I watched her in person. That was a role model of mine. So you're 100% right. Like that's, how far back it goes.
It's very true. It's overdue, but it's good to see it now. Brenda Frese, it's always good to see you. Thank you for your time. To our listeners, thank you for making us your first listen every day. We will be back with you tomorrow, as we are 6 days a week. Until then, I'm Howard Megdal, wishing all of you a wonderful day.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.